Jill and Stacy Show.
Well, good evening. Thank you guys for being here tonight. Thank you, Florence Baptist, for hosting us. This is going to be the 2025 legislative update. I am Representative Marianne Proctor. I represent the 60th District, which is Union and portions of Florence. And my co-host tonight, a good friend and my senator, Senator Steve Rawlings, who represents Senate District number 11, which is the lion's share of Boone County. So tonight, what we're going to do, a couple things. We're going to go through a little bit about how a bill becomes a law, because I think people are confused on how that actually happens, and how sometimes it's better to kill a bill than it is to pass it. We'll talk about some of the bills that went through this session. This is really designed to be informational. This is not designed to be a debate. So we're going to ask you, I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and comments. We're going to ask if you will hold that to the end. Happy to answer those, but just to keep things moving, to keep the agenda going, we're going to go through and then leave plenty of time at the end for questions and comments. So if you would do that, I really appreciate that. So to kind of begin with, this session, the House filed 814 bills, and the Senate did about 370, is that correct?
About 270.
Sorry, about 270 bills. So obviously all those did not come to fruition. 104 bills and resolutions crossed the finish line and are going to the governor's desk for him to sign, veto, or not do anything with and let it go into law. So that's kind of where we are. But what we want to start off with as well, if you would like to get weekly updates from me, my legislative updates, I know some of you do. If you just want to use that QR code and scan that in and just put in your information, that is a direct link to my email site, and then I'll be able to add you to the list, and you can get those, and you can always opt out if you don't want to get them anymore. So to begin with, like I said, we had all these bills, and how does this process actually work? So Senator Rawlings is going to start off and talk about that a little bit.
So all the bills we're talking about tonight have been passed in the House and the Senate and are delivered to the governor for his signature. He's got 10 days from the time we were in session to veto what he wants to. He can either choose to veto it, sign it, or not address it, and it'll go into law after the veto period if he doesn't do anything. So all those bills are set to go, and he's already vetoed a couple, I believe. You know about that. And so it's a long process. I hope you're interested in this. If I talk too long, tell me about running a bill. So it's such a long process and so involved and complicated. So in the beginning, you get a bill idea. We, the two of us, generate a lot of bill ideas from our constituents. They're constituent-driven bills, and that's what's most important to us. But you can go to a conference in the summer, in the interim, and get an idea from a conference. You can get ideas from other states, what they're doing. A lot of the bills that the leadership gets are from Department of Revenue or the cabinets or lobbyists, and so a lot of bills are generated that are handed down. We like to run our own bills from our ideas and from our hard work. You have to work it hard during the interim. You hope to get before a committee and have a hearing during the interim if you can. Senator Schickel, it's called Schickelization. He would require them to if they didn't have a bill in the interim presented, he wouldn't hear it during the session. He just wouldn't have anything to do with it. So that was just him in particular. But so you try to get a hearing initially. So you got to talk to the person with the committee chairperson, which say if it's judiciary, you talk to them. You talk to people in leadership. You try to get a bill run. So first there's a hearing. You try to get everybody lined up. Let me go back a step. We file with LRC, the Legislative Research Commission, and they write the bills for us. So you do a bill request during the interim, and then you file a regular bill during the session. So you try to get a hearing, and then if it passes the hearing, you go to a vote on the floor, and you also have to work that and talk to the leaders on the floor to let it have a vote in the Senate, in my example. And at the hearing, you have to go around and lobby your bill too. You've got to work it so that you believe when you go to the hearing that it will pass. So you need to talk to enough people to make sure. They never want you to go to a hearing if it's uncertain or if the bill's going to die. They only want to look at bills that are going to pass through. So then you go to the floor, you get it there, then it goes to the other chamber, which in my example would be the House. So it goes to the House, and same thing there. You got to lobby the people in the committee, try to get a hearing, go through all of that again. If it passes, then you ask again with leadership. You go to a couple of the leaders, the floor leader, the person that was the committee chairperson, and you try to get it passed there. So if it passes there, you're almost home. But even then, like I had one bill that they did a committee substitute in the House, which means it's got to come back to the Senate for a concurrence. So you vote on it a second time. Then it's delivered to the governor, then he can veto it, and then we come back the next 2 days, Thursday and Friday, we'll be overriding some vetoes, the ones that we were in disagreement with the governor, and you only need 50% majority. It's just a simple majority to override a veto. So that's a step in where we're at right now. We've completed 28 days of the session. Next Thursday and Friday will be 29 and 30, and that's it. That was long enough.
It is. So that's basically how a bill becomes a law. So when people often ask us, well, why don't you just do this bill and get it through? Well, it's not that easy. Or people will say, well, why do you only vote on these type of bills? Because that's all that comes to us. So we don't necessarily have a lot of control over what bills come to us. I think that's really important to know because I get asked that question a lot. Like, why are you only voting on this? And what Senator Rawlings and I both learned from Senator Schickel was defense is often just as important as offense. It is critical to kill bad legislation before it even gets anywhere. And we had a couple examples of that this session. So one of the bills, it was intended, the intent was good. It started off with, when we've got kids in schools who are making terroristic threats. It is obviously kind of put Boone County on the map last year as those national headlines with some of the problems that we had in the schools. And there wasn't a great way to deal with that. It's very expensive for law enforcement and all that were involved. So the goal was to get parents involved and have some accountability, but the parents had them have the skin in the game and be responsible for their kid. But then what it did after that was it made the system that really was attacking homeschoolers. If kids were truant more than the school was okay with, and they didn't take into account chronic illness that could cause a child to miss school, or if they were being bullied and the parent wanted to put them in home school, there was restrictions upon that. And then also, if somebody wanted, if they had a CPS inquiry about neglect or abuse, that no way could they do any homeschooling. Well, that was, most of the time these CPS cases, these abuse, neglect, 89% of the time they are found not to be abused or neglected. So it's a low bar to report, a high bar to actually prove it. And so obviously the homeschoolers were really upset, and because this bill just, it really violated the Fourth Amendment, the Constitution, there were a lot of issues with it that we just killed that part before it came through. And the bill sponsor was very receptive to that and through really the voice of the people. And I think this is where it's really important. When you feel like you don't have a voice, but when you email us, we do read them, lesser form letters. If you send me a form letter, you don't take the time to even where it says, dear, insert your representative's name, and it comes to me that way. And then it's like signed, and it says your name, and it still says your name. I don't take that to be very serious. So, but when we do hear from you and you send us emails, that absolutely helps. We do read those, and we do pay attention. Or when you call the hotline to report, you know, your opinion on the bills, we do get those, and it does make a difference. So always feel like your voice has, if this is heard, it is, we read it even if we disagree. But that was one of the things that was really important too. So just an example of how we kill bills. And sometimes we had one in the Senate Bill 144, passed unanimously in the Senate, came over to the Veterans Committee that I sit on, and this bill was so egregious to us that none of us were going to vote for it. It was going to fail in committee. So that day they pulled it from the agenda and it never came up for a hearing. So that's where we really have the checks and balances between the Senate and the House. We don't always agree. We see things differently, and that's okay. But that's why we've got this, you know, 3 distinct branches of government, and why it's really important for that. So that's just one of the examples of how we kill bills. So then The first bill that I want to talk about tonight, that of all these, we're just going to give you the highlights. Like I said, there's no way we can tell you the 104 that passed, and honestly, most of them you wouldn't care about. But this one was my signature legislation. On this one, this is my anti-squatters bill. So it's become a problem in Kentucky and really across the United States, but in the Commonwealth, we've had problems with people who are unlawfully entering property and taking over. And people say, well, we got cast a law, I should be able to take them out. No, you don't, not in the eyes of the law. You couldn't do that. If you tried to do that yourself, you would be the one that ends up in jail, not the unlawful squatter. So what this bill did, it was really two parts. It already modified existing statute for the criminal penalty for a squatter. It defines what a squatter is. It's nowhere in statute. So we modified KRS 513, which deals with this. It defines it, and if somebody causes damage $500 and under, it's a misdemeanor charge. If they do $500 more damage, then it goes to Class D felony, and they're held responsible for that. But the best thing is that this really streamlines the process for law enforcement. You walk in your house, somebody who does not belong there, and it's any real property. It's your house, it's your shed, it's your barn, it's your land, it's railroads, it's commercial property. It is all real property. If you come in and somebody is unlawfully there, you can call law enforcement. You have to fill out a removal affidavit just to really hold the police harmless if they're following the procedures. You prove your identity, who you are, they will then remove the squatter. Instead of, if we didn't have that, what has been happening is you are going through a lengthy court process to get these people out. It's very expensive, and it can take over a year to get out a squatter. It's happening here. We had a house just in Independence where somebody was a realtor was showing it was supposed to be a vacant house, walked in, and there's squatters in there. So it's putting people's lives at risk, our realtors, things like that. So I'm really proud of this. This was a hard push to get this bill through. So this one is through. It's sitting on the governor's desk. He has not vetoed this one yet, but it's just really a streamlined process. And there were a lot of stakeholders involved in this. I was really happy with the collaborative work from Boone County Sheriff's Association, all the police there. The Kentucky Sheriff's Association worked on this. Our county and prosecutors and attorneys and our realtors were all involved. So it was a very well vetted bill with a lot of input. We did a lot of modifications to it to make it the best law that it could be, and hopefully we don't have to come back and clean it up. But that's House Bill 10.
Let me share one story that we heard Sunday morning. A friend of ours is a friend in Utah. His parents died and had a home in California. He went to the home in California and found out somebody was living there. So he tried to do what he could through the authorities, and they said that through the law enforcement, they said there's nothing they can do. So at one point, he did what he could, got into the house, and he got arrested. And in the end, what happened was that he had to pay the squatter money to get rid of him. So he had to pay him money to get him out. So that's why this bill is needed. And those are the kind of scenarios we hear about. Senate Bill 68. So the Kentucky Department of Education worked with me on this bill, and they endorsed the bill, and I was able to get a lot of strong language, so about excellence in education, academics, civics, technical and vocational training, and there were some cleanup language. So sometimes a lot of the bills that we vote on down there are considered cleanup bills. So some of it was cleanup. I think this bill will save a lot of money and time and resources at the school level and at the Kentucky Department of Education level because it removes a lot of bureaucracy, bureaucratic levels, and red tape. But I will give you a caveat to that, is the Kentucky Department of Education met with me, and they wanted to remove the requirement to report physical education. So all the schools do different things, and they do PE differently. So they have to spend a lot of time reporting this. They send it to the KDE, who does really nothing with it. It doesn't work. It's just a bureaucracy. So we were going to cut that, and my original bill cut that. And then when it went over to the House, they did a House committee substitute, and they put it back in. And the reason they did that is they wanted to send the message to people in Kentucky that we care about physical education. So I just want to use that example. Those are the kind of things that we have to play against and work through down there. That's pretty typical. You file a bill, and you want, say, 20 good things in the bill, and you have to accept that there's going to be 19 good things in the bill or 15 good things in the bill, there's always pushback from some group. So that's a constant battle to keep your bill as strong as it can. But it's still a very strong bill, and it should be good for the schools and save them a lot of trouble.
Okay, the next one, that's probably if a lot of people are curious about, is House Bill 4. This bans the DEI programs at the university levels. The reason why this happened, for a lot of things, but I think it's really important to talk about what DEI does not do. The passage of this bill, it does not affect programs like Title IX. It does not affect civil rights associations and those things that are already in practice. What it does do is it cuts funding and bans for DEI offices. And just for example, UK spent last year $10.5 million just on DEI initiatives. So what's happening is it's costing a lot more tuition, and it's creating more divisions, and there doesn't need to be. So this bans from considering race, national origin, sex, or religion in hiring, admissions, and scholarships. I believe everybody believes that diversity is fine. Equality is great. Equity means equal outcomes. We can have comments at the end. We have them. And we welcome them. So these initiatives have been in process for over 10 years, and it hasn't met its goals. There's data. The data doesn't lie. The very intended people that were intended to help has actually decreased graduations, has decreased the amount of people, the targeted groups that were in colleges. So what it's done is also eliminated free speech. When you've got microaggressions and all these reporting systems and the things that are going on, it makes people fearful. So, this has been this is something that's been battled in the House for a couple of years. The governor did veto it today. I believe it's the second bill that he's vetoed, and I'm sure it will come back up to us when we go back in session on the 28th. So that is what it was, and I'm a proud co-sponsor of that bill because I don't believe it's necessary to have it in our schools.
Senate Bill 2, another one that has some controversy attached to it. So we're sharing these most controversial bills so we can have an open discussion, public discussion of it. So it prohibits the Kentucky Department of Corrections from offering gender transition surgeries. This is in our prisons, in our prison system. So what brought this up was the fact that Governor Beshear did an executive order during the interim when the legislators weren't in and couldn't do anything, and it exceeds his constitutional authority for one thing. He doesn't make law. The executive branch, under the separation of powers, doesn't make law. The law comes from the legislature. So I want to read this to you. For nearly 3 years, an internal memo from the Beshear administration authorized taxpayer-funded gender transition treatments for inmates. Bypassing legislative review and avoiding public scrutiny, the administration never filed the policy as an official regulation, keeping it hidden from oversight until it was exposed. Only then did the administration belatedly file an official administrative regulation, which triggered the required legislative review process. During a December Administrative Regulation Review Subcommittee hearing, Department of Corrections officials refused to answer legislative questions, claiming they had requested a legal opinion from the Attorney General. But records show the request was only filed on Friday before the Monday hearing. Attorney General Russell Coleman responded swiftly, confirming Kentucky has no legal obligation to use taxpayer funds for gender transitions. So this is in the prisons. So the bottom line is taxpayer dollars used for that. So in hormone treatment, so gender transition hormone treatment, the bill does allow a lot. It allows somebody to come off hormones gradually. So there's some specifications to deal with people, and for people that need hormone treatments for other things, it allows for that. So that's it.
And the House Bill 495 kind of dovetails with that. This is one of those bills that started in the House, and what the goal of it was to overturn the unconstitutional executive order by Governor Beshear. The legislative process is a transparent process. It is vetted, it is public, It is debated. It's revised, as you will hear Senator Rawlings tonight, even as they go between the two chambers. The problem with this executive order is it used a unilateral directive. It subverted the constitutional protections for religious liberty. Doctors, nurses, pastoral counselors, they might have lost their license to practice for just reassuring a girl that just because she's a tomboy doesn't mean that she's in the wrong body. Underneath his vague, broad, punitive executive order that he called it the conversion therapy ban, it was much more than that. If you look at the language of that, it went much further with a lot further ramifications. I would encourage you to read the language. And so in House Bill 495, one of the things you'll see in the news, and even from some local elected officials that say that I'm supportive of that, yet they've never spoken to me, don't actually know my view on it. I'm not a mental health person. I don't promote conversion therapy, not my wheelhouse. What I do promote is the Constitution. That is what I'm constitutionally required to do, is to follow the Constitution. When our governor doesn't, then he needs to be reined in, which he was. So House Bill 495 initially was on that. It went over to the Senate. They put a committee sub on it. When it does that, what people may not understand, the original bill, when it goes over there, they put a committee sub on, it no longer is the House Bill 495. It came back from the Senate. This is one page. What the bill says, notwithstanding of this, so what it's doing is it's banning cross-sex hormones and transition services being paid for by the taxpayer. That's all it does, and it overturns Bashir's unconstitutional executive order. It's one page. That's all it does. So the arguments that, well, you guys are promoting conversion therapy or against it, if you read 495, I would challenge you to find where does it talk about conversion therapy. It doesn't. It uses very broad language, and that term is never in there. So I think that's just part of the misinformation that's out there, but those words are not in there. And that bill, 495, as it existed, doesn't anymore because it was replaced by the Senate committee sub. And that's all they did.
Senate Bill 19 requires a moment of silence. So this is a bill that's been attempted for a few years, but what it does is just give a minute to 2 minutes at the beginning of the school day for the kids to sit in their seats and be quiet. And of course they could pray or meditate, whatever they want to do, or do nothing. But I like the bill because I co-sponsored the bill, because I like that it keeps the kids calm and calms them down before the day starts. We hear it from all these professionals about mindfulness, and this is basically what that is. Just be quiet, get ready for the school day. Then moral instruction, the bill allows an hour a week. So if somebody wants, it's totally voluntary. If they want to choose to go to moral instruction, it's off campus, away from the school. And it includes transportation time back and forth. So it's very simple, just for parents that want to do that. One of the critics of the moment of silence was saying that we got to quit uploading things on teachers that they have to do. And I understand that, because there's so many requirements on teachers. And so that was one criticism of the bill, and it overwhelmingly passed despite that, but I do understand that we're overloading teachers with so many requirements. It's crazy, but that's it.
You're fine with that.
And then the next one, House Bill 15, this one, not a lot of objections because it's a May. So it allows for 15-year-olds, they are now eligible to apply for driver's permits. So, this particularly affects rural Kentucky. These kids are driving tractors and they're already on vehicles and things like that, but it just starts the process. All the other restrictions as far as the licensing, it's still in there. None of that changed. It's just lowered. It lowered it to 15. It's still up to the parents. You can decide, do you want your 15-year-old to start? Some are mature enough to do that, some of them are not. Up to the parents. That's all that one is.
Senate Bill 1, everyone in the Senate voted for this, but there were others in the House that did not. But again, I want to show you how we've got different competing interests. The ones that didn't like the bill are the ones that don't want money going to the movie industry and out-of-town producers who come in and bring in their own people, and they don't think it's effective to use taxpayer funds for that kind of thing. On the positive side, it's modeled after Georgia. Georgia, supposedly, they get 6 times as much as what they invested, so 6 to 1 effectively by having this industry and promoting the industry. And Asbury College has a department of film and production. Every one of their students at Asbury get jobs after school, and they're high in demand, and they're behind the production team of the Olympics. So that all ties in. Pretty amazing that a school like Asbury provides that. I heard an example, Steven Spielberg asked about one of them to work with him in his production. So it's a really successful program. It's been tried in other states, not always with a high level of success. So it's interesting. I'm just trying to give you an idea of the pros and cons down in Frankfurt that you hear, and you have to go with your gut and what the people of your district, what you hear from them, how they want you to vote, so that we're always going to be constituent oriented in our voting. We always want to do that, do what our people want, the majority of our people.
I was once in opposition to Senate Bill 1. I didn't think it was a great priority. I mean, for me, it was really difficult to justify taxpayer dollars going for this when we don't know the ROI, when we, again, for a lot of the things that Rawlings talked about. But one of the things that I really had a hard time with, it authorizes the executive director to be hired for $225,000. And that's problematic because you've got to suspend a statute that prohibits any state employee from making more than the governor. So there were some issues for me that I personally was opposed to, but it passed overwhelmingly. The next one, House Bill 208. This one has come out for a lot of reasons. We're seeing significant declines in our school performances and the things with mental health, and we're seeing the apps and the bullying and the things that are going on in the schools. So this is one way to begin to address that. This limits cell phone use during instructional time. And this includes every type of apparatus you can imagine. So your wearables, like my watch, where I get a notification. If you get a message, you get an alert, you get a vibration, any kind of communication, that is banned during instructional time. Now, obviously, there are exceptions. There are some children that have these kind of wearables for if they have diabetes. Obviously, there's exceptions for that. And it also comes down to the teacher. There's still local control on this. This will be something that our local school board will need to have the policy on it. But this is the first steps that we're doing, and surprisingly, this passed unanimously in the House, and I believe it did in the Senate, and you almost never see that. So it feels like something that's very universally supported, and that's the gist of 208.
Senate Bill 84 prohibits a practice that was done for decades. It's called Chevron deference. So courts were deferring to an agency's interpretation of the law, and a Supreme Court case recently just came out like October 2024, Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo. It said the courts no longer need to defer to administrative agencies. And so if you think about it, those are unelected bureaucrats, and that case was at the federal level. So this Senate Bill 84 makes it the same at the state level. So no longer will courts take the agency's interpretations of the law. It's a classic separation of power constitutional argument. The lawmakers make the law, it comes from the legislature, and the courts rule on that law, given the set of facts. So it cuts out the bureaucracy, the bureaucrats. And it's so bad at the federal level that that's been going on for years that it's called the fourth branch of government, because they set fines, they set fees, levy fines, and they have administrative law judges who answer to no one. So,
what makes you think that the courts are able to make the decisions more than the experts that are in these?
Excuse me, I'm going back to your questions at the end. If you can just hold the question
I'm
there.
curious because I was wondering, I've read a lot about this, and it seems like.
Can you hold your question to the end?
we'll let it all
Let's
end.
hold the
And
rules.
giving
And
back
later.
out the courts.
Later, Skip. Thank you for coming. We really
Just a question, please explain.
No,
What's it?
Sir.
no.
Sir, we've made it very clear at the beginning that we'll do questions at the end.
Yeah,
If you would be
can
polite
ask us a little bit.
and wait till we
I'm
finish.
sorry, maybe both at the same time.
Well, you're probably embarrassed because you keep talking.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
We've asked that you will wait until the end when we will accept questions. We're not quite finished. So I'm going to ask you to go back.
I'm sorry, there's a lot going on. I just wanted to make sure that we're able to address one at a time. I've taken some notes too, so it's okay. We'll talk soon. Thank you.
That's fine.
Thank you so much.
If you continue to be disruptive, we're going to ask you to leave.
Thank you.
It's not fair to the people who are here.
Agreed.
Well, that's the explanation. We can go on to the next one.
Okay, and then this one is very important to me. This is one of the bills I co-sponsored. This has to deal with removing certificate of need. And I've done a survey on this, and I saw a lot of you. I don't see anybody who is supportive of certificate of need. Some people are still unsure, but for those who don't know what it is, in this Commonwealth of Kentucky, if you want to open up a new health facility, whether it's a hospital, it's an ambulance service, it's an MRI, it's cancer treatment like a linear accelerator, it's 32 different services and technologies, you must get a permission slip from the government to be able to do that. That is why in Northern Kentucky, we have 17 counties in Northern Kentucky and part of Eastern Indiana that are basically serviced by only one hospital system of St. Elizabeth's. So when you're wondering why don't we have the other hospitals here, because they can't. The only thing that the other hospitals are able to do, they can have primary care services. So we see Cincinnati Children's, which came into Union, backyard I'm very happy about. It's a $10 million project, but it still is not a fully functioning hospital. It just does basically ancillary services and some primary care physician services. I myself would like to see this be a full hospital, a great place to start, to really allow people more opportunities to have more than one healthcare provider. So on certificate of need, what this did, this removed the certificate of need, or sometimes you'll hear it called CON, for freestanding birthing centers. Now there's a lot of guardrails on this bill, and the hospitals had a lot of input on this, and the hospital associations, and they were agreeable to this. But this just allows women to have a choice where they want to have their baby. They don't want to go to a hospital here in Northern Kentucky. They're able to go to one of these birthing centers. So this is really important to a lot of people in the community. And for me, I'm very happy to see the first step to begin to repeal the certificate of need. And just to kind of give you an idea, when Kentucky, they regulate 32 different services and technology. Our neighbors to the north, Ohio, has one certificate of need, that's for long-term care. Same for Indiana. West Virginia is in the process about ready to overhaul their entire system to repeal all the certificate of need. Our neighbors in South Tennessee, they've got 6 or 7 different things that are regulated by certificate of need. So we are way out of balance with the rest of certainly our surrounding states. So this is something I hope to continue to work on. This is something that we will be doing in the interim. I already filed several bills on it this session. But in short session, they weren't going to do major legislation like this, and this would be monumental for the state of Kentucky.
Senate Bill 202, we purposely went with bills that are controversial or in the news. We're not shying away from it. And this one was a shell bill, which was a bill that became law later, and we had a short time to look into this. And we're not a state that has recreational marijuana, but we are, because these THC-infused drinks have like 100 milligrams of THC. So it's an unregulated area. So the leadership wanted to form the regulations to deal with this, and instead of just ignoring it. I initially voted for the bill. It went over to the House, and there was a ton of amendments, and it was a committee substitute. And it came back, and I did vote no the second time around. I don't know what your vote was on it. I think you voted no too, didn't you? But anyway, there's just a lot of issues with it, so I just voted no. And talked to Senator Schickel later, and he said he was inclined to always vote no on shell bills because they bring them in too late, and you can't properly vet them, so there's just a bunch of issues with them. So anyway, It regulates the industry. There's a lot of issues with it, and I'm sure it'll be brought up again next session for another look over.
Yeah, that was a bill I was no on because it's actually called weed water. I didn't even hear of it. Apparently it's a new product out there that even a lot of our sheriff's offices weren't aware of. But I was a no on it because it's a first step to regulating, codifying recreational marijuana. And I'm not in favor of that. So I was a no on that as well. House Bill 695. Okay, this is a really important bill. In the state of Kentucky, we are the 47th highest for unemployment. We have a lot of people of working age, able-bodied, that are not returning to the workforce for whatever reason, but part of it is because of the generous benefits to stay at home. So one of the things this does is, again, addresses Medicaid. So the governor, this bill is really comprehensive. There are a lot of parts to it, but some of the highlights are it puts restrictions on the governor. He can't expand Medicaid services without the consent of the General Assembly. There's some concerns that there's going to be cutbacks in Medicaid. Instead of being a 70-30 plan, it might be a 60-40. If that goes that way, that with our current spending, it is the largest of our general fund. It would put Kentucky in a $4.4 billion deficit. So this is just some regulations to make sure we don't get out of control of spending. The other thing that this does, if you are able-bodied, you have no dependents, you do not get to stay on Medicaid. You have to be actively working or in school or some kind of community service to be able to obtain these benefits. So we're not talking about people who are elderly. We're not talking about people who have disabilities. We are talking able-bodied, no dependents. You gotta work if you want to continue to receive these benefits in Medicaid in particular. So that was what that bill did. It just put some checks on the governor on spending. We still are one of the worst our states for unfunded pension liability in the entire United States. So we're working to try to make our pension solvent, to get our Commonwealth budget back in order. It's going to take time. It takes a long time to kind of right that ship. But by being responsible with the monies that we're spending, it's a great step in doing that. So that's 695.
That's about it then? Okay, I think an important announcement, please. There's a critical issue in our area, in Boone County, of teen and youth suicides. So there's a meeting next Monday at 6 p.m. at the Extension office, and it's hosted by Sun Behavioral Health. So whoever, if you can be there, it's an important thing we're dealing with in the community. There supposedly was 7 attempts and 5 successful attempts, and that's the numbers that are going around right now. So that is a prayer point and an issue to deal with in any way we can help with the kids.
Save the children.